Something I like to say is when you're accustomed to privilege, equality starts to feel like oppression. And a lot of people think feminism is women want to be better than men, but it's like, we just want to be treated equal.
How are we doing? How far have we come? How far have we come with women's rights?
We've come farther than the 1800s, but not far enough. If you don't want to get an abortion, no one's stopping you from not getting an abortion. You know, keep your child, but don't push that onto me. Like, if I want to get an abortion, I should be able to. And it's, you know, we're all about protecting the unborn, but what about the kids that are born? And, you know, they're doing nothing about guns. It's that the thing that is actually killing children, but we're so focused on protecting the children that aren't even alive yet. And if you believe life begins at conception, great for you. You know, that's your belief, but that's not everybody else's belief. Children are not 30-day free trials. You cannot decide that you just don't want the baby. You can't just throw it away. So, you know, why would you put a child in a situation with a parent that doesn't want them or can't raise them? Then what?
They want women to keep those babies, but then if they're like, oh, but you can just, you know, give them up for adoption or put them in the foster care system. The foster care system that is just like, at this point, not even livable for people. Like, it is truly just like a scary place, especially for POC.
Abortion, like, you can't do this to me, you know? It's unacceptable. It's really like, it's torture for the person who has to be in that situation, and especially for the baby who was born as a mistake or as an accident. I don't know why, like, maybe it's men who says that, yeah, abortion should be illegal.
Hey, Monet, do you think that you have this perspective because you grew up in the foster care system? Has that shaped you?
I think I have a lot of knowledge of being inside the system. There was a lot of problems with my life, how I'm an immigrant coming to the Americas seeking asylum, and yet seeing a lot of all these problems, where sometimes I wish I could go back to the camps. My father told us to not cry, and he would hit us. So I developed a way to cry silently. The landlord heard that my father was a very abusive person, and me and my brother went to be sent back into another foster home, where he is currently adopted now, and that family is great for him. I hope he's really happy. However, I did not want to be adopted, so I was moved into a different foster home, and right now I'm just trying my best to smile and be the best person I can. The foster care system is so messed up on so many levels. Like CPS, when they come to like inspect and all that, they see a happy little old family with an adopted child, even though like behind every door, behind every curtain, there is something wrong.
I think that it's important to like talk about it growing up like in a Christian household. I grew up very religious, went to church every single Sunday, went to youth group every single Wednesday. It's become a huge part of like who I am and like who I identify as and like what I like my values and what my core values are. And I think that it's a very political topic in, you know, the Christian community, and like as a Christian, like, well, what do you believe? Like if you believe that if you're not pro-life, you're wrong. Like as a Christian, you know, like you read the Bible and all of that kind of stuff, and you know, God tells you that you're pro-life, like that's what you're supposed to believe in a sense. But I think that it's important to like realize that like you don't necessarily have to be. Like you can have your own opinions, you can have your own beliefs, and you know, just because you believe different than what the pastor at church is like speaking in the sermon, or what the you know, older Christian folks are saying, or you know what they're saying, just because you don't believe that doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. Like how are you going to tell people that they have to carry their baby fully determined, they have to give birth to this kid, but then not provide a safe environment for them to live in? Like how is the foster care system slowly falling apart and you're not providing for the kids that you are forcing to be born? And I think that's
abortion made me so nervous to talk about. I identify, you know, as a Christian student athlete. I am a Christian student athlete. I'm not a Christian athlete. I'm not whatever, like Christ is the center of my life and like who I am. I think for me that like it instilled like hope.
With me being a young man, I think that I have no dealings or conversation of what a woman should do with her body. And I think that when we talk about politicians, I think no middle-aged man should have any conversation.
So you think it's none of your business?
No, I think, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think in my shoes, I think no, that's not a male's topic. You know, I just think that what a male should focus on is his life, and with women, I think it's just they have their life, you have yours. And when we talk about people and what women, I just think it's pointless that men are raised like that.
You want men to stay in men's business?
Yeah, because I think that, like, what place do you have, especially with us being in 2023? What place do you have? I mean, it's not. I think that the only time it comes up is if you're having a baby with another woman, which that's how it happens.
And that's your child.
And that's your child. I think that's when your voice does matter to a certain extent. And again, I even feel like, and that's just my personal belief, that I'm not the one carrying it. I don't go through the stress with it. She does. So the only thing that I can do is emotionally support her the best that I can.
If we took that same topic about abortion and had men, like, giving birth, what would you think that the men would say? Like, oh, yes, life this, life that, okay. But what if you were sexually assaulted? Would you still give birth to that baby? From somebody who sexually assaulted you, who, like, forced you, and yet society wants you to give birth to this baby because you have a life inside of you. I think men, being how they are, would heavily disagree. Like, oh, it's not going to happen because I'm a man.
It's interesting seeing the girls' point of views and then seeing the men's point of views and how they differ from each other. I'm a man. It's their business, you know. It's not really, you know, something for me to really touch. You know, I'll let you do what you want to do and let me do what I want to do.
But can you think about it from our perspective? Say, for example, your daughter got sexually assaulted, and a lot of people, even you, may believe that she should have the child, but she doesn't want that child.
Still to come, the teens open up about the pressure they're under.
In my household, if it's not an A, it's a fail.
My mom, she owns her own law firm. She has multiple small businesses. So I'm like, wow, for me, like, I gotta step up my game.
Their message for teens and parents.
It's okay not to know what you want to do when you go to college.
And the surprise advice our young entrepreneur got.
I was talking to, he was Governor Ricketts at the time. He's like, are you going to school?
That led him down a different path from college.